What would you give up to tell the truth? Not a small truth. Not the kind where you admit you forgot to reply to a message or you were late because of traffic. I mean a truth that costs you something real. A truth that, the moment it leaves your mouth, you know your life will never be the same again. Most people never tell that truth. They carry it quietly for years. They wrap it in silence and bury it beneath the weight of everything they are afraid to lose. Their job, their reputation, their relationships, their comfort, their safety, and they tell themselves, one day when the time is right, one day when it is safer, one day when the cost is smaller. But the cost never gets smaller. It only grows. Today I want to tell you a story about a king who faced that moment. A moment where the truth on one side and everything he had built on the other, and he had to choose. And what he chose, and what happened because of it, is one of the most quietly powerful lessons about integrity that I have ever come across. His name was Ashoka, and before he became one of the greatest rulers in human history, he was one of the most feared. Ashoka ruled the Maurya Empire in ancient India, roughly 270 years before the birth of Christ. His empire stretched across nearly the entire Indian subcontinent, from the mountains in the north to the coasts in the south, from the deserts in the west to the forests in the east. He commanded the most powerful army of his age. He had wealth beyond imagination. He had conquered kingdoms that had stood for centuries. He had crushed enemies that no one else dared to face. By every measure that the ancient world used to judge greatness, Ashoka was great. And then he rode out to the battlefield of Kalinga. The war against Kalinga was supposed to be the final jewel in Ashoka's crown, the last great conquest, the territory that would complete his empire and cement his legacy as the most powerful ruler the Indian subcontinent had ever seen. The battle was won. Ashoka's army was victorious. By the standards of ancient warfare, it was a success. But as Ashoka rode through the aftermath of that victory, as he looked out across the fields of Kalinga, what he saw was not triumph. He saw 100,000 people dead on the battlefield, not soldiers, people, fathers and sons and brothers and men who had picked up weapons because their home was under attack. He saw another 150,000 dragged away in chains as prisoners of war. He saw villages that had been homes the week before turn to silence and ash. And standing in the middle of all of it, at the absolute peak of his power, at the moment when every general and every advisor around him was celebrating, Ashoka felt something he had never felt before in his life. Horror, not at the enemy, at himself. This is the moment that changed everything. Because what Ashoka did next, what he chose in that moment, is something that almost no one in his position has ever done before or since. He told the truth, not to his advisors, not to his court, not in a private letter that no one would ever read. He carved it into stone. Literally. He had his confession engraved on pillars and rock faces across his entire empire, words that his subjects and his enemies and history itself could read forever. He wrote, and I am giving you the meaning of his words, that the conquest of Kalinga was not glory. It was grief. That the death of even a fraction of those people was not a price worth paying for territory. That he, Ashoka, the most powerful man in the known world, had been wrong, a king, admitting he was wrong, in stone, for everyone to see. And then, because words without action are just decoration, he changed. He renounced war. Not because he was forced to, not because he lost. He was at the height of his power. No one could force him to do anything. He renounced it because the truth inside him made continuing impossible. He converted to the principles of nonviolence and compassion. He began ruling not through conquest, but through welfare. He built hospitals, he built roads, he planted trees along highways so travelers would have shade. He created the earliest known animal welfare laws in human history. He sent ambassadors, not soldiers, to neighboring kingdoms, carrying not threats but ideas, philosophy, ethics, the dignity of life. The man who had been feared became the man who was loved, and his empire, rather than collapsing because he put down his weapons, flourished. It became more stable, more prosperous, more enduring than it had ever been under the force of war. Now, I want you to sit with what Ashoka actually gave up in that moment on the Kalinga battlefield, because it was not nothing. Telling the truth, admitting he was wrong, cost him his identity, the identity of the great conqueror, the warrior king, the unstoppable force that every enemy feared and every ally celebrated. That version of Ashoka, the one he had spent decades building, died on that battlefield as surely as the soldiers who fell there. He gave up the narrative, the story his empire told about him, the legend that kept people loyal through fear and awe. He traded that story for a different one, a true one. And that is the thing about integrity that nobody tells you honestly enough. It always costs you something. Always. The person who tells the truth at work, about a mistake they made, about a project that is failing, about a decision that was wrong, they pay a price. Maybe a small one, maybe a career-defining one. The person who tells the truth in a relationship, about how they really feel, about what they really need, about who they really are, they pay a price too. The friendship might change. The relationship might not survive it. The comfort of familiar silence gets broken. Integrity is not free. It was never meant to be free. But here's what Ashoka teaches us about the cost. The cost of telling the truth is real, but it is finite. You pay it once. It is heavy and it is painful and it changes things. But you pay it and it is done and you can move forward carrying only yourself. The cost of not telling the truth is also real, but it is not finite. It compounds. Every day you carry an unspoken truth, it grows heavier. Every day you perform a version of yourself that does not match who you actually are. That performance costs you a little more energy, a little more clarity, a little more of yourself. And slowly, without you even noticing, you become a stranger to yourself. Ashoka could have ridden home from Kalinga and said nothing. He could have let the celebrations continue. He could have added Kalinga to his list of victories and moved on. No one would have stopped him. No one could have stopped him. But he would have known. And that knowing, carried silently for the rest of his reign, would have hollowed him out from the inside. Instead, he chose the heavier path in the short term, and it set him free for the rest of his life. There is a word in Latin, integer. It means whole, complete, undivided. That is where the word integrity comes from, not from perfection, not from never making mistakes, from wholeness, from being the same person in every room, from your private self and your public self telling the same story. When Ashoka carved his confession into stone, when he made his inner truth a public one, he became integer, whole. For perhaps the first time in his life, there was no gap between what he felt and what he showed the world. No performance, no mask, no distance between the man and the king. And that wholeness, that complete, undivided integrity, became the foundation of everything he built afterward. A foundation of truth holds more weight than a foundation of image. Every time. Now let me bring this closer to your life, because you do not need to be a king standing on a battlefield for this lesson to matter. You have your own Kalinga. We all do. It might be a conversation you have been avoiding for months, a truth you have been carrying about your health, your work, your relationship, your finances, something you know that you have not yet allowed yourself to say out loud. It might be a mistake you made that no one knows about yet. It might be a path you have been walking that you know in your quiet moments is not yours, but the thought of admitting that feels like too much to face. That is your Kalinga. And just like Ashoka, you have a choice. You can ride home and say nothing, keep the performance going, keep carrying the weight of the untold thing, and pay that compound cost, quietly, invisibly, every single day, or you can tell the truth, not because it is easy. It will not be easy. Not because it costs nothing. It will cost something real. But because the version of you that exists on the other side of that truth, whole, clear, free, is worth more than any throne you would have to give up to get there. Ashoka is remembered today not for the wars he won. He is remembered for the moment he put down his weapons and told the truth. His edicts, those stone-carved confessions and commitments, have survived over 2,000 years. They stand today as some of the oldest written evidence of a leader choosing conscience over conquest. The warriors who fought for him are forgotten. The kingdoms he conquered are dust. But the truth he carved into stone, that truth is still standing. So whatever truth you are carrying right now, whatever you have been waiting for the right moment, the safer moment, the cheaper moment to say it. Not because the timing is perfect, it will not be perfect. Not because you are ready, you may never feel ready, but because the cost of silence is higher than you think, and the freedom on the other side of honesty is greater than you can currently imagine. The king gave up his throne for the truth, and in doing so, he built something that outlasted every throne in history. You do not have to be a king to make that choice. You just have to be brave enough, for one honest moment, to say what you already know. This has been Fable Light. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs the courage to tell their truth today. We will see you in the next one.